Friendship Paradox. Let's suppose you feel like your friends are more connected than you. More parties, more calls, more people who know their name. It might seem like you're just imagining it, but you're not. Statistically, your friends are more popular than you. Not because you're less, but because the more popular someone is, the more likely you are to be friends with them. That's the trap. You're looking through a lens that was bent from the beginning. This paradox is a mirror held up to perception. It shows us that social reality is not symmetrical. You are more likely to compare yourself to outliers because the network favors visibility over truth. The popular are not just seen more, they become your standard. They become your expectation. And when we measure ourselves against them, we forget the invisible threads that skew the view. So next time you feel behind, ask yourself, are you truly alone? Or are you just standing in a room of echoes, hearing the loudest voices bounce off every wall? Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, revered and ancient. The ship of Theseus. Its wood weathers with time, its boards replaced one by one. Years pass, and now not a single original plank remains. And yet, it still carries the same name, the same story, the same identity. But then, imagine a collector saved every old piece, reassembled them, built the ship again, using only the original parts. Which one, then, is the true ship of Theseus? This paradox isn't about ships, it's about you, about identity. If every cell in your body replaces itself over time, are you still the same person you were as a child? If your memories change, your beliefs shift, your face matures, are you still you? The ship of Theseus whispers that continuity is an illusion, that identity is not in parts, but in narrative, in the story you tell. So, maybe it doesn't matter which ship is real. What matters is which one sails in your mind. Zeno's paradox. Suppose you want to cross a room. To do that, you must reach the halfway point, and before that, half of halfway, and again, and again, every step divided by two, forever. How can you ever arrive if you must always cover an infinite number of smaller steps? Zeno's paradox says motion is an illusion. That reality contradicts what your senses swear is true, that between every 2 points lies an eternity. But we do move, we do cross rooms. The contradiction doesn't vanish, we simply live beyond it. This paradox is a reminder that logic, too, has its limits, that the world may not always obey our tidy definitions, and that some truths are felt in the body before they're proven by the mind. The paradox of choice. You walk into a store, 10 different brands, aisles of possibilities, colors, features, promises. In a world of endless choice, freedom should bloom. And yet, your chest tightens, your mind races, your satisfaction fades. This is the paradox of choice. More options often lead to less happiness, because when we choose one thing, we also choose not to have all the others, and our minds replay the alternatives. What if that one would have been better? What if I chose wrong? Regret creeps in where freedom was promised, and so we scroll and shop and swipe, never settling, never fulfilled. But what if freedom isn't about having every door open? What if it's about walking through one and never looking back? Barber Paradox. There is a town. In this town, the barber shaves all those who do not shave themselves, and only those who do not shave themselves. The question is, does the barber shave himself? If he does, then he must not, because he only shaves those who don't. But if he doesn't, then he must shave himself, because he shaves all who don't. The logic collapses. The rule eats itself. This paradox is not about barbers. It's about systems that try to define themselves. It's about self-reference, loops that spiral into contradiction. It reminds us that not all problems can be solved within their own boundaries, that some systems need to be stepped outside of to be seen clearly, and sometimes the question isn't who shaves the barber, but why did we build a rule that breaks when it looks in the mirror? The Bootstrap Paradox. Let's suppose you're a musician. You find an old piece of sheet music and learn to play it. Years later, you travel back in time and hand that music to your younger self. That version of you grows up, learns it, and passes it back in time again. But here's the twist. Where did the music originally come from? The Bootstrap Paradox asks how something can exist without origin. When an object or idea is passed back through time and causes its own existence, the chain of cause and effect loops. There is no beginning, no source, just a circle. It bends our understanding of causality, of time, of what it means to create. Can something truly exist if it was never created? Or are we just pulling ourselves up by logic's broken bootstraps, hoping the loop holds? This paradox reveals the fragility of origin stories. And maybe, just maybe, not everything needs a beginning to exist. Maybe some truths don't start anywhere. They just are. The twin paradox. Imagine two twins. One stays on Earth, the other boards a spaceship and travels at near light speed. When the spacefaring twin returns, less time has passed for them. They are younger than their sibling, but both were born at the same time. How can this be? Einstein's theory of relativity says that time isn't fixed. It stretches and shrinks depending on speed and gravity. The faster you move, the slower time flows for you. But our minds aren't wired for that. We see time as absolute, as a river flowing forward. This paradox challenges that river. It makes time feel elastic, and it asks, if time can move differently for different people, then what is time really? A ticking clock, or a living thread that stretches with the path you choose? Sometimes, understanding isn't about unraveling the paradox. It's about learning to live with the idea that time might not be what we think at all. The Omnipotence Paradox. Suppose there is an all-powerful being. Can it create a stone so heavy that even it cannot lift it? If it can, then there's something it can't do. Lift the stone. If it can't, then there's something it can't do. Create the stone. Either way, it's not all-powerful. This paradox isn't about theology. It's about the limits of definitions. What does it mean to be all-powerful if power itself is defined by logical consistency? If you're powerful enough to break logic, does that still count as power or as incoherence? The Omnipotence Paradox shows that even perfection, when stretched too far, folds in on itself, and it reminds us that perhaps power, like truth, only means something within a framework of rules. Break those rules, and even infinity starts to unravel. The Lottery Paradox. You hold a ticket. The lottery has millions of entries. It's almost certain that your ticket won't win. You believe that, and yet someone's ticket will win. That's also true. If everyone believes their own ticket will lose, and they're rational to do so, then we end up believing that no ticket will win. But that's impossible. The paradox sits right there. The sum of reasonable beliefs leads to an unreasonable conclusion. This isn't just about gambling, it's about probability, about truth in the face of uncertainty, and about the fragile bridge between individual logic and collective reality. The lottery paradox teaches us that certainty is sometimes a luxury, and that believing something unlikely doesn't make it untrue. The paradox of tolerance. In a society where everyone is free to believe anything, what happens when some beliefs are intolerant? Should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? If it does, the intolerant may rise and destroy that tolerance. But if it doesn't, then it's no longer fully tolerant. This paradox is more than a thought experiment. It's a warning that values, when left undefended, can be dismantled by the very freedoms they protect. It's not about silencing others. It's about understanding the boundary where tolerance becomes vulnerability and where defense becomes necessity. The paradox of tolerance asks us, how do we protect the right to speak when some voices aim to silence all others? It's a question without an easy answer, but one we must never stop asking. The Raven Paradox. Imagine the statement, all ravens are black. You see a black raven. Seems to confirm it. But here's the twist. Logically, anything that isn't a raven and isn't black also supports the statement. A green apple? A red chair. They're not black ravens, so they technically confirm the rule too. This is the Raven Paradox. It forces us to rethink how evidence works. What actually confirms a theory? Do all irrelevant observations count? It shows us that confirmation is tricky, that logic sometimes stretches so far it snaps, and common sense feels more reliable than math. The Raven Paradox asks, can truth be proven by things that have nothing to do with it? The paradox of value. Water, essential for life, is cheap. Diamonds, mostly useless, are expensive. Why? This is the paradox of value. It reveals that value isn't about usefulness, but scarcity and desire. We pay more for what's rare, not what's vital. Our economy doesn't reward importance, it rewards perception. This paradox isn't just about pricing, it's about the human mind, about how we mistake shine for substance and illusion for truth. The most valuable things often cost nothing, and the most costly things often aren't worth it. The paradox of tragedy. Why do we enjoy stories that make us sad? Why do people cry at fictional pain? The paradox of tragedy asks why suffering, when artfully presented, becomes beautiful. It's because tragedy offers catharsis, a release. It gives shape to emotions we can't explain and pain we've never felt. This paradox shows us that meaning is not in pleasure alone, that beauty can live inside sorrow, and that feeling deeply, even sadness, can be a kind of joy. The Preface Paradox. You write a book, every fact, every claim, thoroughly checked. But in the preface, you write, some errors may remain. Why? Because experience tells you no book is ever perfect. Here's the paradox. You believe every fact in the book, but also believe at least one might be wrong. It's the paradox of humility versus certainty, of being honest about uncertainty while still standing behind your words. This paradox teaches us that truth isn't always absolute. It's often conditional, always evolving. The paradox of the heap. You have a heap of sand. You remove a single grain. It's still a heap. Remove another. Still a heap. But keep going. At what point does it stop being a heap? This is the Sorite's Paradox. It asks where the line is. When does small change become real change? It's not just about sand, it's about identity, language, transition, about how vague definitions can trap us in endless debates. It teaches us that some boundaries are not lines, but gradients, and that change doesn't always announce itself with clarity. The paradox of the unexpected hanging. A judge tells a prisoner, "You'll be hanged next week, but it will be a surprise. You won't know the day." The prisoner thinks, "If it's Friday, and I'm still alive, it must be that day." But then it's not a surprise. So Friday's ruled out. Same for Thursday, and so on. Eventually, the prisoner concludes it can't happen. But then he's hanged on a random day, and he's surprised. This paradox is a trap of logic, a loop of expectations that breaks when reality steps in. It teaches us that some knowledge ruins the knowing, that not everything can be predicted, and sometimes the very act of thinking too much blinds us. The paradox of inquiry. How do you search for something if you don't know what it is? If you know it, you don't need to search. If you don't know it, how will you recognize it? Plato's Meno posed this. It's a riddle of learning, of discovery. This paradox invites humility. It reminds us that the path to truth isn't always direct, that wonder begins in ignorance, and learning begins in questions we don't yet understand. The paradox of the tortoise and Achilles. Achilles races a tortoise. He gives the tortoise a head start. By the time Achilles reaches the tortoise's start point, it's moved slightly ahead. This keeps repeating. He's always behind. Zeno posed this paradox to challenge motion and speed. The math says Achilles should never catch up. Reality shows he easily does. It teaches us that logic can mislead, that abstraction and reality don't always align, and sometimes the fastest way forward is to stop overthinking. The paradox of the map. If a map were perfectly accurate, scaled down to include every detail of the land, it would be the land. But then it's no longer a map. So to be useful, a map must be inaccurate, simplified, incomplete. This paradox applies to all models of reality. Every belief, every idea, every system is a simplification, not wrong, but never the full truth. And that's okay, because usefulness often lives in imperfection. The grandfather paradox. You travel back in time and accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. If he never has kids, how are you born? And if you're never born, who went back in time to stop him? This is the paradox of time travel, where cause and effect spiral into contradiction. It forces us to confront the fragility of timelines, to ask whether changing the past is possible, or if time protects itself by breaking the rules when we try.